Labour is winning in the polls, but quietly imploding behind the scenes. Keir Starmer's own party is turning on him, and one unlikely name is starting to circle: Ed Miliband. Welcome to Power and Policy UK, where British politics meets real power. No spin, no slogans, just the forces shaping Westminster and what they mean for you. Uniquely loathsome. That phrase has been doing the rounds in Westminster circles this week, and while it hasn't been officially pinned to anyone, many Labour insiders know exactly who it's aimed at: Keir Starmer. And suddenly, the idea that his leadership is untouchable doesn't look quite so solid anymore, because one name keeps surfacing in the background of this growing discontent: Ed Miliband. Now, on the surface, this sounds absurd. Starmer is leading in the polls, Labour is positioned for government, and Miliband already had his shot at the top job and lost. End of story, right? Not quite, because politics isn't just about polling numbers. It's about trust, ideology, momentum, and crucially, what happens when a party starts to believe its leader is becoming a liability rather than an asset. Starmer's problem isn't that he's unpopular with the electorate, it's that he's increasingly unpopular with his own side. Over the past few years, Labour has undergone a transformation so dramatic that many long-standing members barely recognize the party they joined. Promises quietly dropped, red lines erased, policy positions reversed or blurred beyond recognition, and all of it justified in the name of electability. For a growing faction within Labour, that word has started to sound like an excuse rather than a strategy. Starmer's leadership style hasn't helped. He governs the party with tight control, ruthless discipline, and an almost managerial detachment that some MPs describe as cold, legalistic, and transactional. Critics argue he doesn't inspire loyalty, he demands compliance. And when you combine that with high-profile expulsions, internal clampdowns, and a clear sidelining of the party's left, resentment builds fast. This is where Ed Miliband re-enters the conversation. Miliband has done something quietly impressive over the past couple of years. He's rehabilitated his image. Once mocked relentlessly by the media, he's now seen as one of Labour's more serious thinkers, particularly on climate, energy, and long-term economic reform. While Starmer has shifted rightward and stripped out ambition to avoid controversy, Miliband has stayed focused on structural change, especially public ownership in energy and aggressive climate investment. And here's the key difference. Miliband still talks like someone who believes in something. That doesn't mean there's an active leadership challenge underway. There isn't. But politics rarely announces itself in advance. What is happening is a slow, deliberate repositioning. Miliband is everywhere. Media appearances, policy discussions, behind-the-scenes briefings. He's being treated less like a former leader and more like a potential alternative future. Some Labour MPs privately argue that Starmer is winning despite himself, that the polls reflect Conservative collapse rather than Labour enthusiasm, and that once Labour actually takes power, or even just gets closer to it, Starmer's lack of clarity, warmth, and ideological direction will become impossible to ignore. That's where the phrase uniquely loathsome becomes politically dangerous, not because it's rude, but because it signals something deeper: emotional detachment. Voters might tolerate a dull leader, party members might even tolerate a cautious one, but when people start to actively dislike the leader's character, authority drains away fast. Miliband, for all his flaws, doesn't generate that kind of visceral resentment. He's awkward, yes, earnest, definitely, but he's also perceived as principled, thoughtful, and motivated by something more than just winning. And make no mistake, this isn't about nostalgia, it's about succession planning. If Starmer stumbles, if Labour underperforms, if early compromises in government alienate the base, the party will look for someone who can reset the narrative without tearing everything down. Miliband fits that role almost too neatly. Of course, there are risks. Miliband lost once, and the memory still lingers. The press would revive every old attack line within minutes, and any leadership challenge would risk fracturing the party at the worst possible moment. But Labour history shows one thing clearly. When leaders are perceived as hollow, replacements emerge whether the timing is convenient or not. So, is Starmer about to be challenged? No. But is his position as unassailable as it once seemed? Also no. What we're watching now is the early stage of political erosion, quiet dissatisfaction, alternative voices gaining oxygen, and a former leader, once written off, being slowly recast as the conscience of the party. In politics, leadership rarely ends with a bang. More often, it fades under the weight of its own compromises. And if Starmer continues down this path, managing rather than inspiring, calculating rather than convincing, then the question won't be if Labour looks elsewhere. It'll be who's ready when they do. This is Power and Policy UK. If you want sharp analysis, not party talking points, hit subscribe, because power never stops moving and neither do we.